from Oakland University campus in Mount Clemens. And it is my pleasure and honor to introduce you to Nancy Maurer, who is going to be our speaker, who's going to talk with us a little bit from her background, which includes more than 25 years of organizational and individual coaching. And when I was talking with Nancy, got a little bit of an insight in terms of just 3 months before COVID, you kind of went out on your own. This was the first time doing this individually. So an entrepreneur, and what a challenging time to do that, especially with individuals, with a lot of the stresses and all that are going on right now. I'm sure that's keeping you exceptionally busy, Nancy. But with your background that you have, one of the things is leadership development in terms of getting individuals involved. You were the executive director, or are, you can correct me on that one, for Leadership Oakland, where you take individuals and take them throughout a year to learn a lot about what goes on in the community. But at least in my experiences through Leadership Macomb, it was really about people and getting to know my classmates, which were a wide, diverse group from a number of different career fields and backgrounds. But it just helps leadership development as a whole. So and by the way, you're a voracious reader. All right. So that ought to lead to some great questions and everything as we go forward right there. It says you're a catalog. So we're going to pluck from the catalog and ask you all sorts of challenging questions. But once again, welcome to the second breakout session. My name is Doug Slocum from Purpose Point, and it is my honor to introduce you to Nancy Maurer for our second session today. You've got it.
Okay, thank you so much, Doug. Wow, what a great introduction. And I am the former executive director of Leadership Oakland. Doug, can you, if you can still hear me, can you have Lisa enable screen sharing for me so I can share my slides? Otherwise, I'm just gonna tap dance the entire time. Wow, what great speakers so far today. I hope they've given you a lot to think about. I know they have certainly given me a lot to think about so far. And the next 35 to 45 minutes is going to provide you with the opportunity to digest some of that information in an actionable way. Doug mentioned human card catalog. Here, I'll throw maybe a new term out that you haven't heard yet, and that is contemplative activity. And we're going to be talking about how to find the quiet to move. Here's my slide. First
There
of all,
you go. You have the ability to share your slides now, Nancy. You're up.
Got it. Okay. All right. We are rolling now. Okay. So we are going to spend the next 30 to 45 minutes finding the quiet to find the path forward. And it's going to be a little bit of a buffet style. I know it's been a long time since we've been through to a buffet restaurant, but this will be a little bit of a buffet style talk. Some research and science. If you were in Gabrielle's talk, she talked about being a data nerd. I'm a data geek. It's going to be experiential, some spiritual, however you might define that word, and definitely real world. So let's start by looking at what is quiet anyway. And for our good friend Webster, the definition of quiet means free from noise or uproar, marked by little or no motion or activity. And I don't know about you, but that brings to mind Zen-like environments filled with hours to ponder the meaning of life and purpose. And that's great. It can look like that. But I can bet there's a fair amount of you who are sitting there thinking right now, Nancy, do you even know my world? I have a million thoughts going every second, and I've been in the house for the better part of a year with humans and other breathing beings. And so, with all due respect to Webster, I prefer to take the realistic optimist approach. And I know some of you are probably Bible readers in the group, and there are, I think 55 different versions of the Bible. So I thought, well, let's do a new dictionary. So this is the NAM version of the dictionary, which is the Nancy Maurer version, where I say that quiet is whatever you need to get focused, centered, and clear. Period. End of story. When or where do you feel the most focused, centered, and clear? Is it alone walking in nature? Is it in a coffee shop surrounded by people? Is it brainstorming with a valued friend? So take a couple of minutes to think about that and then jot it down. So this is the contemplative activity part. Where do you feel the most focused, centered, and clear? And feel free to share with your friends in the chat. This is a great opportunity, even if you are virtual and not in purpose in Mount Clemens, to get to know some other folks. So we'll take just a couple of minutes to jot that down. So have you got a sense of where you find quiet and what that means to you? It means different things to different people, but almost universally, it's the first thing to go when life gets busy. And that is not good because there's a lot at stake when we let that quiet go by the wayside. First, time gets distorted. It's not the right time. Time. The reality is time is finite, but it's also relative. How many of you have put something off and then tackled it only to find it took a whole lot less time to do it than you thought? In fact, you might have even spent more time ruminating why you didn't have time to do the thing than it actually took to do the thing. So time gets distorted. We also get into a bit of a zoo mind where there are so many thoughts swirling that we latch onto one and we move forward just to get something done. Who's with me on that one? And the result is, well, sometimes we end up looking like the fine animals over there on the right. The reality is our unconscious mind is where the magic happens. It's not a coincidence that many brilliant breakthroughs come to us when we're in the shower or folding the laundry or gardening. It's that space of mindless inactivity, the unconscious mind, that the path forward does begin to emerge. Now, many people who give a talk like this will talk about meditation, and I am a big fan of meditation. I am also a person who said for years that I couldn't meditate because my mind couldn't be still enough. And I've come to make peace with meditation because it is awesome, that it's not about keeping the mind quiet. It's about being able to return the mind to quiet. And in the absence of that quiet, contemplative place, we also tend to kind of should all over ourselves. Yet, you know what that looks like. I should do this. I shouldn't do that. I should feel this. I should be further along. I shouldn't be overwhelmed. It's messy and counterproductive. One of my favorite speakers, Rob Bell, says, should implies that we have something to compare our current state to. I don't know about all of you, but I have never been through a pandemic before. I've never lived through some of the experiences that many of us have had in the last year with the tumult and a lot of the civil unrest. So should can go right out the window. And what's at risk when you should all over yourself is that when you're self-critical, you become a lot more likely to procrastinate, because not only does the task trigger the feelings of overwhelm, it also triggers shame or anxiety about even having those feelings. And that is a spiral that is incredibly counterproductive. We also tend to default to our dominant defenses, which often really aren't all that pretty or effective. And that's perfectly normal. We have less cognitive and emotional bandwidth to consider other options. And so something that might be a strength becomes one of our weaknesses. Just like the little boy in the picture there, persistence can come outright stubbornness and defiance and hold us back. And finally, my favorites, withdraw. Who doesn't love a really good pillow fort just to weather out the storm? But when we withdraw, we miss out on the critical collaboration and support. So I'm going to ask you, what is your one go-to? Pause a moment and think about, which one do you tend to default to in the absence of quiet? Okay, there's one more bigger thing that's at stake than all of those combined. And that is, we live someone else's life. Let that sink in for a minute. We live someone else's life. And I know that seems dramatic and daunting, and it is. But it's in the title of the talk. So let's take a deep breath and then look at the benefits of quiet. Looks pretty good, huh? I don't know about you, but I think I'd like a lot more of that. So what gets in the way? There, in the middle of all the noise, are the answers. And when I start working with a coaching client, I hear a lot of, I don't know, answers to my questions. And when I tell them they do know, they look at me like I'm crazy. And I know that look. I've given it hundreds of times. In fact, I have one client who does this, tilts her head to the side like a little puppy dog, and she stares straight into the camera and she blinks really fast. Like she just is, but the truth is, the answers are there. The answers, your purpose, all of that is there deep down inside. It just takes a little bit of excavation and digging. And so let's put our miners' hats on, get our pickaxes, and start chipping away through the noise, shall we? So there are two types of noise. There's internal, and those are those thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations that get in the way. External, everything else. And this has been quite the year for a lot of external noise. Wouldn't you agree? A lot of external noise. We're dealing with a lot of decision fatigue, making new decisions about how we're going to move forward in this world in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of everything else that's going on. And now noise, it's not inherently good or bad. It just is. And it's what we choose to do with it. Unfortunately, biology isn't exactly on our side with this one, because right alongside the noise comes its good friend, negativity bias. And negativity bias is when we tend to hold more tightly to negative experiences and thoughts than positive ones. The average person has between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of them are negative. And that's according to the National Science Foundation. And it's not our fault. It's not all our fault. What we choose to do with it, that is our choice. That's our responsibility. But it's rooted in our ancestors constantly having to scan for threats. And the fight, flight, freeze response made them be on the lookout for anything bad happen. Now, there aren't many times now that in our day-to-day life, we are being chased by a mountain lion. Certainly we do have a number of challenges in our own each individual lives, but our brains never evolved beyond that. So we have to work, some say 7 times as hard to counteract that negativity bias. So for every piece of self-criticism you give yourself, I want you to say 7 things that are absolutely fantastically fabulous about you. And it might seem like we're doomed with the negativity bias, but I am not going to leave you hanging here. The first thing that you need to do every single day, along with brushing your teeth, is to take out the trash. And I don't mean the garbage and recycling. I mean the head trash, the shoulds, the self-judgments, the what will other people think, limiting beliefs. In the past year, I have heard so many limiting beliefs about what is or is not possible that never were rooted in any action or reality. No one starts a business in the middle of a pandemic. Yeah, I kind of did. No one leaves a job they have in the middle of a pandemic. Yeah, they can. They can. And if you listen to Nick earlier today, our kickoff speaker, there's about percent of the attendees, if not more, are also thinking about what's next and what's more meaningful in their lives. And that may mean a change of career. So leaders, listen up. This is a turning point for a lot of people. So take that head garbage out. Take it out. And I'm going to give you the opportunity right now to do that. Think about what piece of head trash are you going to throw out right now? It's not leaving. It is not leaving wherever you're sitting, the room that you're in. You're going to throw it out. You're not going to carry it forward anymore. So what is that one piece that you are going to let go of? And I'm looking at the chat here and I see that I'm not enough. And I want to thank Catherine for being brave enough to put that in the chat. because I would guess probably there are a fair number of people also watching that have that same thought. And that is head trash. Head trash. So we're throwing it out. One of the keys also is to keep the noise from getting into our heads in the first place. And we do that by using noise filters. So a series of questions that I want you to think through as we go along about the external noise. Now, this is the noise of other people's opinions. This is what we see on social media. This is what we're ingesting, whether it is through the information sources that we use and that we see. And that first question is it valid? Does it matter? Previously, Doug was the executive director of a leadership development nonprofit called Leadership Oakland, and technically reported to a board of 8 people. Some I worked with really closely. Others I saw at the quarterly board meeting and on occasion. I mean, all really great people, all dedicated to the cause, all had an opportunity to weigh in on my performance evaluation. And when the president and vice president would sit down with me to go over the feedback, one of the questions that I would ask is, because of course, a lot of high achievers, high aspirers, people who attend things like the Purpose Summit tend to gravitate toward that. Remember, negativity bias. So there could be 70 great comments and 1 constructive or critical comment, and boom, 0 right in on that one. And I would ask the president and vice president, is it valid or is it noise? And they were able to help me discern. Now, it was valid from the person who was giving the viewpoint, absolutely. But what I needed to know before I could act on it, because the one person acting on the feedback of 18 people, that's kind of like a recipe for disaster. No focus. And we would look at, was there a theme? Did more than one person have that piece of feedback? Where did the feedback come from? Was it valid or was it noise? So I encourage you, as you're thinking through some of this external input, is it valid? Does it matter? Secondly, there are a lot of things out there that do not deserve your time or attention. Consider the source and make sure it's the source. Especially if, it's hard to escape social media nowadays. Like everything has its awesome, great side. It also has its potential for not so great. Consider the source and check your sources too. It's the former journalist in me. Check your sources. Next, is it in your best interest? When you step into your purpose, that is going to make some very well-intended people uncomfortable. When I decided that I was going to leave Leadership Oakland, there was nothing wrong with the position. I loved it. I was living my purpose at that time fully when I was there. And then I got the tap on the shoulder, the call, that unmistakable voice that it was time to go deeper into my purpose. And the energy that it takes to run a nonprofit was going to take away from what my next iteration of my purpose was going to be. And so I made the decision to leave a full-time job that I loved to start my own business. Now, can you imagine the reaction that brought from a lot of people? A lot of really well-intended people. They were concerned. They wanted to make sure I was sure. So there will be the well-intended people who have that your best interest at heart, but it might not be in your best interest. And then there are those some not so well-intended people who don't want to live your purpose for one reason or another. And if you're not sure if something is in your best interest, find someone you trust who is as high aspiring as you are to help you gut check that information. And make sure that this person is someone who will give it to you straight, speak the truth, but speak the truth in love and kindness and have your best interest at heart. Then the final question in sorting through the noise is this noise moving you toward your purpose, or is it distracting you? And if the answers to those questions are no, then there's one thing to do. And that is to put on your symbolic headphones. And that term is courtesy of someone earlier in the pre-chat on Huva who shared that tip. So I'm gonna use it. Davin Wickstrom, if you're here, thank you. I just gave you credit. So put on those symbolic headphones and stay focused on what you have to do. Now we've tackled the noise, but there is another formidable foe in discovering the path forward. And that is fear. And when I first saw this quote, it kind of like took my breath away a little bit because it's so true. Fear kills more dreams than failure ever will. And then if you lop on the fear of failure, well, you got a whole lot going on there. And as we go into this next section, I would not be living my purpose of using my unique gift to empower people to live to their fullest potential if I didn't do my part during Mental Health Awareness Month in helping to dispel the stigma against mental health issues. I don't know a world without anxiety. I don't remember a time that it wasn't a part of my life. And I'm not sad about that. And I no longer feel less than or shame around it at all. I speak publicly on it a lot because anxiety is my superpower. It's what makes me high functioning and driven and out to change the world, to help people find their purpose and live it. That's also my kryptonite, depending on how I react to it and how I take care of it. Now, I'm not saying that anyone who feels fear has a mental health issue, although we cannot ignore the fact that the skyrocketing number of anxiety cases in the past year. But the next 3 steps that I'm going to go through that I use to harness my anxiety for good and not to my detriment are the same ones you can use to go from fearful to what I like to call fear lifted. Harnessing that fear to propel you forward. The first one is name it. Name it. 37% of people cannot accurately identify their emotions. That just took me by surprise the first time I heard that statistic. And I would say that 99%, if an emotion is affecting us in a negative way, it's fear. And when I make that assertion, sometimes I hear, whoa, Nancy, wait a minute. Not afraid. I'm just angry. I'm just frustrated. And if I ask, where's that coming from? What's going on with that? We ask that question, why? What's going on? What's going on? Usually by about the 5th time we dig down that far, there's some element of fear involved. So I'm going to challenge you, not necessarily right now, although you can if you want. I mean, heck, if you're watching virtually, your mics are muted, go ahead. Say it out loud. Say, say what is going on. I'm really nervous to be speaking to you today. I said that before I sat down. And you know what happens when you say it out loud? It loses some of its power over you. It actually changes your body chemistry to say it out loud. Give it a name. My anxiety is A plus, which pretty much sums up the way it shows up in my world, which is the constant striving, the moving forward, the wanting to be better, 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 better. My anxiety is A plus. And when it shows up now, I'm like, oh, hello, A plus. What you got for me today? Then we start to tame it. And fear means well, it really does. But it is a horrible decision maker. It's again rooted back into the caveman era where our brain wants to protect us. So it's going to take us to the worst case scenario. And I like to say, fear gets a voice. It doesn't get a vote. We can listen to the fear. We can acknowledge it. We listen to the anger, listen to the sadness, listen to the grief. Heck, absolutely listen to the joy. And then ask yourself 3 questions to tame the fear. And I'm going to walk you through a story of a client of mine last year who was a career transition client, and he was in the job market, was in the final stages of interviewing. He's in the final 2 and was expecting to have a decision fairly shortly. I think he was supposed to hear by Friday. And Monday comes, Tuesday comes, nothing. Wednesday comes, he calls me and he is angry. He's upset. I can't believe this. This is disrespectful. And he's upset. And okay, so if we dug down deep enough, that was fear driving that anger. Excuse me. So the first question is, what story are you telling yourself? So when I asked my client, okay, what story are you telling yourself? Well, this person is rude. They're blowing me off. Clearly, I didn't get the job. All kinds, again, boom. Okay, so let's beep, beep, beep. Let's get the recycling garbage truck here. Lots of head trash going on there. Okay, so that's the story you're telling yourself. Own it. What is true right now is the second question. What was true in that instance was pretty black and white. He just hadn't heard back. They were supposed to make a decision by Friday. It was Wednesday. He hadn't heard back. That's what's true. What do I know for sure is the third question. And all he knew for sure, again, was that he hadn't heard back. He didn't know that they had hired, if they had hired. He didn't know if he was being blown off. He didn't know any of that for sure until we were able to actually, he had the conversation, I didn't, with the potential employer. So tame it, put it in its rightful place, because fear, anger, they're going to get you all hyped up. That adrenaline's gonna, and then you're gonna end up making decisions that are not in anyone's best interest. And then finally, and we reframe it by saying, how can I look at this differently? What else might be happening here? What is the next small step? So in the case of the client that I was working with, I asked him, okay, acknowledge, again, name it, tame it. Now let's start to reframe it. What else might be happening here? Take yourself out of that noisy spiral loop into a place of, I mean, you're still moving. It's contemplative. It's contemplative quiet, contemplative activity. And once we started to process that through, he said, well, it was a holiday weekend. It was in May. Okay. So maybe something happened at work. Maybe the process is delayed. We brainstormed all kinds of other things to kind of neutralize that emotion and that storytelling. What else might be happening here? And then what is the next small step? And what we had decided was, and the next small step doesn't have to be a leap. When we're talking purpose, when we're talking finding the path forward, sometimes that next step is just one step forward on a foggy path, but it's one step further than we've been before. And the next small step that he took at that time was to make a couple of calls. Now that he was in a better headspace, not feeling like he'd been blown off or disrespected or didn't get the job, he made 2 calls. And what happened was they hadn't hired anybody yet. They had an emergency at the manufacturing plant, and it was all hands on deck, and they were delayed in hiring. 2 very different outcomes. One, had he not taken the time to find the quiet, to find the path forward, he would have absolutely burned a bridge, if not more. Now, it turns out he did not get the job, but he did have a good relationship going forward. So I ask you, as we get ready to wrap up here, what do you need to aim and put in place in order to step forward into your purpose? Take a couple of minutes and think about that. Feel free to share it in the chat. What noise is getting in your way? Is it external? Is it internal? And then most importantly, what's that one small step you're going to take? And I'd love to hear from you. What is that small step that you're going to take? Oh, and I'm looking at the chat. Cheryl says, sometimes, unfortunately, it is your own self. Yes. Yes. I work a lot with people who need to get out of their own way. And that is almost, high achievers tend to have that. Again, superpower, kryptonite. And Kathy's saying her own voice is the toughest. Take that head trash out. So it sounds like a number of you on your daily to-do list is definitely that next step is to take that head trash out. Do you talk to yourself the way you talk to a loved one or your best friend? Say, when I get asked that question, the answer universally is I am far more compassionate to other people than I am to myself. So let's right size that. Let's put that in the accurate perspective so you can move forward. So I want to thank you for your time today and for your contemplative activity and your participation. You can find me on my website. There is my email address and my phone. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to talk with you. If you are going to be in person tomorrow, I am actually going to be stopping over at the Purpose Summit briefly tomorrow, and I would love to meet you and say hi and to chat a little bit. So that is. Oh, and I'm giving you 3 minutes of your day back. I always like to wrap. I don't like to go over. I like to wrap up just a few minutes early. So enjoy the rest of the Purpose Summit. Feel free to pop questions into the chat, and I will get back to you. But thank you so much, and enjoy.